Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
We're readers and writers.
We're sci-fi and fantasy fans, and this is the best of all worlds. Well, hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to talk about point of view within stories, and of course, as always, we're going to stick to sci-fi and fantasy, but we want to talk about kind of the different styles of narration, whether that's, first, third person, single, multiple point of view. We're gonna break it all down, all the craziness, and kind of talk about what kind of points of view we prefer to read.
Yes. So we're going to go through all the different points of view that you might commonly come across. And we're also going to give you some book recommendations and examples of books that we thought did these particular points of view well.
Yes, and because it's not so heavy on the tropes and stuff, in particular, I have brought in a lot of dystopian, and I'm very excited to share my literal favorite genre that barely popped up in the other videos or episodes so far.
And the good news is it's pretty easy to talk about point of view without spoilers,
yes.
So no spoilers on this one.
Yes, completely spoiler free, and hopefully we inspire you to read some books that you've never read before, or to just tell us your thoughts on books you've already read, because if you've read these books, we're both all ears for your thoughts on these books.
Yes, as well as your thoughts on what kind of points of view you like, because
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't feel like point of view gets talked about a lot in terms of people's preferences. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if we have hot takes or not.
Yeah, and I do think that even if it's not talked about that much, people have clear preferences. I know I have a very clear preference, and I don't read a lot that goes outside of that preference. I will read some books, but for the most part, I stick to my preferred point of view style.
Same with me. So.
Yes. Well, I feel like I have a good idea of what's your favorite type of point of view, but I'm not actually sure I know. So I'm curious to get into this.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's get started. Ooh. I think it makes sense to start with just the simplest definition of point of view, which is how many points of view are there?
Yes.
So usually you'll either have a book that's got one single point of view and it sticks to that one, or you've got a book that kind of alternates between multiple points of view. There are some books you find that'll fall somewhere in the middle where it's mostly one point of view and then a couple other points of view just got randomly dropped in. But I feel like most of the time it goes one way or the other.
Yeah, a few, some top-of-the-head examples of books that, are mostly single point of view, but have other points of view mixed in, are usually where it's a prologue or an interlude takes place in a different point of view, but then the majority of the story is in a single point of view.
Yes. So between a single point of view and multi-point of view, which do you prefer?
I have a very strong preference towards multiple point of view. I think I've mentioned this before, but dramatic irony is one of my favorite literary devices, and you never get such deep dramatic irony than with multiple points of view.
Yes, it's true. And I have to agree with you. I also prefer multiple points of view. I can enjoy a single point of view. But
Same.
What I like best about multiple points of view is it adds more nuance to the situation that's going on, because you're getting different perspectives on the same thing. And I just find that fascinating. I love getting different perspectives on the same events and how different people view it in different ways.
Exactly. And I think, since we both value themes so much when we're reading a book, I feel like themes can get really deeply explored through multiple points of view, because each person has a different relationship to that theme as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's, one of the coolest things about multi-point of view is each character can cover a different angle to the themes that the author's trying to write. So you can really cover a lot more ground with more than one point of view character.
Exactly. I just think, multiple points of view allows for a lot like you said, I mean, a lot more nuance. One of my favorite authors almost exclusively writes in multiple points of view. He does a lot of speculative fiction. It's Haruki Murakami. And a couple books that really stand out to me as like some of my favorites of his collection are Kafka on the Shore and 1Q84. Both those books have at least 3 points of view that kind of go back. And a lot of it's like between 2 points of view, but then a lot of times there's like a third that kind of gets mixed in here and there more towards the end of the story. He kind of has a pattern with how he does his points of view. And I just like that the characters are interrelated, but you don't know how until way later into the story, which makes it really fun. Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah. I always love a reveal where it's like, oh, this was all connected and I didn't realize.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, my example for where multi-point of view works very well is epic fantasy in general.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout out Wheel of Time because I love Wheel of Time, but especially like in big expansive world building where there's so much going on. There's so many different places. There's so many plot threads. You need multi-point of view because if you have a single point of view, you're gonna be missing like half of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think especially for more epic stories, the multi-point of view becomes very important because then you get all the details and all the nuances of what each faction is doing and how they're gonna come into conflict with each other, and that's some of my favorite stuff in reading. So I definitely enjoy that multi-point of view is able to do that.
Yeah, I can just name like 20 fantasy books off the top of my head that are all multiple point of view. It's just such a common thing.
It's very popular for a reason, because it works.
Exactly. Which is funny because I read a lot of dystopian, which often tends to be single point of view because one of the main purposes of a dystopian is to like put you in the head of a character living in that world. So my example of a single point of view is one of my favorite dystopian novels of all time, and it is A Parable of the Sower, which is about a girl who basically creates a religion when the world is falling apart.
Yeah, I've read that one as well, and it's very good, and it makes sense for that one to be a single point of view because like this girl like is like the central figure of this new religion.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to follow her journey specifically and how she got to where she goes.
Right, and exactly how that world impacted her and why that led her to her religious beliefs in the first place and how that impacted how she interacted with people. It's one of my favorites for a reason. And it's crazy. It took place in 2025. Yeah.
Well, we survived that.
We did.
Get that.
We didn't have what was predicted in this book, so hooray for us. Are we that far off from what was predicted? Not so much, but
This is fine.
the world didn't burn, so yay.
Yay, progress. My example for single point of view that works is one that we've already talked about like way too much, but it's the Dresden Files because it works so well from Dresden's point of view because he just has such like a distinctive and entertaining voice. That it's like, I'm gonna chill in Dresden's perspective this whole time because he's just fun to follow.
Exactly.
So I feel like that's definitely something to be said for like a single point of view. If you've got a point of view character where you're like, I wouldn't even want to follow anyone else because this guy's fun, then it's like, it doesn't really matter as much.
I think one of the advantages to a single point of view is the way that characterization can be dialed up to 100. Like, you can characterize a lot in multiple points of view through third person limited, but there is something about a single point of view and fully getting everything ingrained in their point of view that I think allows for more depth within the character.
I agree. And one more thing to be said for single point of view. I know we've ranted on about why multi-point of view is our favorite, but single point of view is also good for like stories that are very central on like a mystery. Because when you've got like a single point of view who's like trying to figure out what's going on, then like following that one person as they unravel the secrets can be, it can help because then you're not getting all the outside perspectives that might spoil parts of the of the plot.
That's a great point. It's very common in thrillers. Like, a lot of thrillers are single person. Not always first person, but a lot of times they're also first person. Which leads us well into our conversation about the differences of first, second, and third, and which ones are preferable.
Yes.
This one's gonna get spicy, I think.
Oh no. Yeah. So I guess for anyone who's not, deep into the point of view world as we are, being both readers and writers, first person is, a story told from the perspective of like, I did this or I do that, that perspective. Second person is where the narrator's like talking to either the reader or someone else that they're addressing as you, like you're using that tense. And then third person is just like, Kristen did this,
Right.
Kristen does that, just a little more removed.
Yeah. I would think that most people who don't read often would assume that third person is like the standard, though I think there's pretty much a balance between first and third person. Second person's very uncommon.
Yes.
For a reason. For a reason. I'm so excited to talk about second person because I actually have a book that does second person well, but I, as a general rule of thumb, am not a big fan of second person.
Well, why not? We don't have to do this in order. Let's just dive straight on into second person, because I also have thoughts on that.
Second person is sometimes really difficult to read because when it's you're doing something, it almost feels like you're role playing into the story or something, or they're like talking to you specifically and directing your action, and something about that just doesn't jive in my brain. When I read you and they're talking to me, it's so uncomfortable. But one of the books that I really like is called The Fifth Season, and there are 3 points of view. One of the points of view is in second person the entire time, and that takes up about a third of the book. And I've seen a lot of reviews where people hated those chapters, but I never once saw it as anything other than a person dissociating, and the you was them talking to themselves. And because of that context, that allowed me to get past my discomfort with the you second person point of view situation because of the way it was utilized. Otherwise, it kind of feels like a build your own adventure or like choose your own adventure kind of thing, and that's just not for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think second person, when they're trying to refer to you as like the reader, I don't love that.
Ugh.
But when the you's referring to a character within the story, then it works way better for me.
Exactly.
So I was trying to come up with an example for second person. I was like, have I even read a second person book? And then I was like, wait a minute. Is how you lose the Time War, a second person book? And then I had to literally go to the shelf and pick it up and open it. And sure enough, it is in second person, and I didn't even process it because it was so good.
Right, because it's like letters.
And the reason, yes, it's letters. So it's like, you don't even question it when you're reading it. Like, yeah, of course they're saying you because it's red and blue writing to each other. So, yeah, they're referring to each other in the second person because that's what you do when you write someone a letter. So it's like that's when second person works really well, when there's just a perfectly logical reason within world for the character to be telling the story this way.
Yeah, it needs context because I do not want, as a reader, to be put into the story in that way. Like, I don't like that, but when I can tell that it's a character talking to someone and that you is not me, unless it's like, dear reader, listen to my story, and they use the word you as they're telling the story, but only enough to like include you as a listener, not so much as a participant. That can sometimes work for me, but yeah, as a whole, I'm not a big fan of second. I mean, again, there's a reason. I don't think most people are a fan. I think that's why it's not like really a common storytelling type.
No, yeah, I don't think that's a hot take that second person isn't popular, but I don't know. Let us know in the comments if you're like, second person is my favorite. How dare you?
Yeah, but that actually kind of makes me think we both have a friend who loathes first person stories. Loathes first person because in her perspective it feels like it reads like she is doing the thing. So it's like the same kind of issue that I have with second person is her issue with first person, cuz like when you're reading I am feeling such and such, especially because first person is often present tense as well, so it's not so much looking back, it's actively happening. That can be a little too involved sometimes. I never had that issue, but we have a friend who has that issue, so I thought I would mention it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not an issue I've had with first person either. I think my issues with first person come down to probably the last categories we're going to discuss. So I'll save them until then. but I think first person can absolutely work just fine. I don't have an issue with it as like a concept. A lot of my favorite books have been first person books. You can do first person with just one point of view. You can also do it with multiple points of view.
You've written a book like that. First person,
Yes, I
multiple point of
actually
view.
have, in fact, written a first person multiple point of view book. And I just read another one recently that was pretty good. So it's it's really quite flexible. Like as long as you handle it well, I think first person is no better or worse than using third person.
I agree. It kind of comes down to, and we're going to get to that point, but like whether or not it's a limited point of view, that I actually prefer limited points of view in general. Not that I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the only reason that I prefer third person to first person is because I prefer multiple points of view stories, and it's not very common to have multiple points of view that are in first person. But like you said, it does happen sometimes. But my example of a first person story is all from one perspective. And it is also a dystopian, surprise, surprise, called Never Let Me Go, which is about clones who get their organs harvested once they turn 18. So they have like basically a ticking clock on their life, and it's a love story from the perspective of one of the girls that is a clone. Dystopian is depressing a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of part of the genre.
Yeah,
So.
it's to be expected in dystopian. But man, is that a really good story, because you start off with her as a child kind of figuring out that she's a clone and that she lives in this world, and then it develops into that love story. I mean, the love story is kind of there the whole time, but because it starts so young, it's more like they're friends that turn into romance later on.
That's interesting, like combining the romance with the clones. Sounds like a fun setup.
Yeah. I always like a depressing romance. Like, I don't read a lot of romance, but I love a depressing romance.
Listen, I'm also kind of here for a tragic romance.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I can't help it.
I like to feel things that are negative for some reason. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's the drama. It's for the drama.
Yeah, we love drama. Woo.
What is your first person example?
Yeah, my first person example is actually a book that I read very recently. I'm like, oh, this is a good first person book, which is an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. So this one worked really well in first person because it's being told by someone who is like literally an internet influencer. So it makes sense for it to be her telling her story to an audience, because that's what she does for a living.
Right.
So it's one of those cases where it's like, yes, like this wouldn't have made sense to be not first person, just based on what the story is and how deeply it's centered around this one character. And it's also just a really good story. If you enjoy sci-fi and stuff about internet culture, highly recommend. Just read it and very much enjoyed it.
And aliens.
And aliens, yes.
Yes, that's what got me interested. Actually, I didn't love the social media aspect, but I understand why you did, because it kind of like, it's like a comp for your own story that you're writing.
Yeah.
I much more was enamored by the like alien aspect, because there's something about it that reminded me of Cloverfield, but more whimsical. I don't know. Cloverfield is a horror movie.
Yeah, this one's not a horror movie, but there are some kind of dark things
Yeah,
that happen.
exactly.
So be aware of that, but also there's a lot of like comedic snarky moments too. So
Yeah, the character is
it's got a
great.
good balance.
Yeah. Talk about a guy who can write a girl well.
Yeah, it was very well done. So, yeah, that's a good example of a first person book if you like sci-fi, or even if you're not a huge sci-fi reader. Like I don't read a ton of sci-fi, but that one I thought was really accessible, that I think anyone could probably pick it up.
Yeah, and what I like about that particular one is that it takes place essentially in modern day. So it's not like the tech is super advanced. Like, what makes it sci-fi are the aliens. The rest of it is basically like contemporary.
Yeah. So, it's a good lens toward our modern world, which I appreciate.
Yeah. And it's made by one of my favorite YouTubers. And then for third person, we could put any fantasy, not any, but like most fantasy under this.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of third person, and I will admit I think third person is my favorite. If I had to choose between first person and third person, I'd pick third person just because it's more likely to be done in a way that I enjoy.
Same, yeah.
Like first person can be done just as well as third person, but I feel like it's not always.
Yeah, first person can also be really annoying.
So therefore I gravitate toward third person if you had to ask me what was my favorite of the three.
Same. I would 100% also choose third person. I even write myself mostly in third person.
Same with me, which is funny because like the trilogy that I published is two first person points of view, but since then I have written like exclusively in third person. So
you found the art of third person limited and you were like, heck yeah, like let me just switch completely to this. But what was your third person example?
So I'm like, I could give so many examples because I read so many third person books, but I decided, shout out to Mistborn because Mistborn is great and we haven't talked about it enough. Honestly, like most things by Sanderson, he writes a lot of third person, but I enjoy like getting the perspectives of like multiple different characters in third person. It really like aids with that multi-point of view setup that we talked about earlier, because if you're trying to keep track of like 20 perspectives, it helps to be clearly calling out the names every time you're reading. So having everyone talking in first person perspective would get very confusing very fast.
Yeah, exactly. Mistborn is great. I love Mistborn. I need to read the last one, but I just enjoy Sanderson's writing style. He's just got it's engaging and there's a lot of political stuff happening, which I think would be a lot harder to portray with first person, to be quite honest.
Yeah, for sure. Like lots of political stuff, lots of good themes. We should have like a Sanderson chat.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yes. Okay, my third person is a sci-fi, and it's one of my favorite sci-fis. It's a classic. So this is classic, but probably also under the dystopian category. It's called Brave New World. Also about clones. Didn't plan that. It's just clones happen to be common in sci-fi. But the book takes place, well, essentially, the narrator kind of is, and we'll get into this, omniscient. So they're just telling the story and they're going from different characters to tell the story. So it's not limited at all, really. So, but it's a good time. It's a good time. Is there depth with the characters? Not so much. But that's just all classic sci-fi, I'm not going to lie. Almost all classic sci-fi is third person and omniscient, which we're about to get into, and lacks depth for the characters. That's just, you just have to expect that with old sci-fi, unfortunately. But yeah, we should definitely now, I mean, we've kind of danced around the topic. We should really break down the difference between limited third person and omniscient third person.
Yeah, I feel like this is where it could really start getting like heated. I don't know, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about like limited versus omniscient, but I have opinions.
I have a
on
strong
this.
preference.
Same. So, what's your preference?
Well, limited is absolutely my preference because I like having more personification in the way that things are written. Not saying that omniscient can't, because when you have a narrator telling the story, that can have its own personality, which my example is exactly that. The example I'm about to share is a narrator who has a personality and a sense of humor about how they tell the story. However, I like the nuance, like you were saying, so I much prefer to have third person limited, which is the case in most multiple point of view stories as well, because why would it be multiple point of view if you're just gonna, tell it from an omniscient narrator who knows
Yeah.
everything? It's nice that when you're in a point of view, you only understand from that character's point of view their emotions, their reactions to things, which is what allows for that juicy dramatic irony.
No, I'm in full agreement. I much prefer limited point of view over omniscient point of view. Omniscient point of view can be done well, and I have some examples, but limited point of view for sure. I one of my favorite things about reading is I want to get into the head of the characters. Like I want to get deep in there. I like the deep limited point of view where you're feeling the things the character feels. You're following along with their thoughts. Like I want to get all the way into their. I want the psychology. I want to know how their brain works.
Yes, exactly. I want to know the why behind their behavior.
Exactly. So it's like that's what limited perspective is really good at, because it really helps narrow in on the specific character and their specific perspective. And plus it prevents the annoying thing that omniscient tends to do, where it's like, little did I know that
Oh my God.
everything was going to go wrong. That is one of my pet peeves. I was reading a book recently that was actually a very good book. Like I liked almost everything about it except for the fact that it had an absolutely unnecessary omniscient narrator where the main character would occasionally just pop in and say, that was not going to last. I'm like, you don't have to pop in and tell me that. Like, that added nothing to the story. And if anything, it just took away from the dramatic reveal. Like, I want my dramatic reveal, please.
Yeah, I feel like what's happening there is that the author is not trusting the reader enough, and so they're giving to, like, they're explaining. That's kind of the definition of show don't tell, like where you're like, little did I know, or like what, like we can just get into it, like just trust me as the reader to get where you're going, like I will figure it out.
Yeah. And I feel like, to give them the benefit of the doubt, I feel like authors do this as like to build suspense, but I feel like for me it does the exact opposite. I'm like, really?
Yeah, it takes you out of the moment when you have comments like that. And I've been guilty of that. I mean, I've written my fair share of little did I know.
But I have to say, the book that I brought up for first person, an absolutely remarkable thing, is one book that manages to do this without annoying me. And it's because of the character's voice. Like, this is a character who's telling the story after the events of what happened.
Right.
And she's an internet influencer, so obviously she's gonna like embellish upon the story and give opinions, and like, so it makes sense from her like established character that she's gonna be like, yeah, so this in hindsight like maybe wasn't my best choice ever, because it's like, yeah, an influencer would do that. Influencers literally do that. They'll like make an apology videos and stuff like that. So it worked because of who the character was and what their voice was. And I feel like that's the only way it works, unless it makes sense for the narrator to be dropping in hints about, oh, things are going to go bad, or watch out, this might not go as well as you
Right.
think it is. It'll only work if it's done in character with a compelling voice.
Yeah. I took the assignment very literally, and I looked for a limited third-person book that only has one point of view. And maybe I took that assignment a little too literally, but The Giver by Lois Lowry is I'd call it like a middle grade dystopian. So, like, it's much more
Yeah, I
accessible
agree
to
with that.
younger kids about a world where emotions are wiped out in order to create peace. But one person must carry the memories of all of humanity, and it's hard. And I think it's a really beautiful story, and it's told all from Jonas's point of view in a third person limited way. Like, we get his emotions, no one else's, but it's not in first person either.
That's a good example of how, like, a limited first person and a limited third person can really accomplish pretty much the same thing. Because just being limited into that one character's head is like whatever, words and verbs and pronouns you're using doesn't really make that much difference,
Right.
because the whole point is you're in the character's head and you're exploring their specific journey.
Exactly.
That's a very, very good book. It's been a while since I've read it, but I know it. I still remember it, so that's how you know it's a good one.
Exactly. You can easily read it in an afternoon. It's 100 pages, so it's not very long. Actually, I was surprised how short it was when I reread it back. I think I read it when my power went out in 2020 for like a week, so I just had a bunch of free time. I read that book so quickly. It's very short.
Good book, and definitely like a thought-provoking concept.
Absolutely.
For sure, which is, it's impressive that it can be like so like good and thought-provoking and still like accessible to a younger audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best things about it. I actually just like that there is quite a bit of dystopian sci-fi that is accessible for middle grade and teens, because I feel like that's an age when you're starting to explore morality, and morality is almost always a major theme within any dystopian, so I like it.
For sure. So for my limited point of view, I decided to go with the first person limited point of view, which is one that I've read more recently. It's very popular. You've probably seen it floating around the internet. But The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So it follows, for those who don't know, it follows a human girl who's living in the Fae realm. And this is like one of those Fae realms where the Fae they're not like the sexy, sparkly kind. These are like the ones that make deals and stab you in the back and will, in fact, eat you if you're not careful.
Nice.
So it's like a very like intrigue filled, there's politics, there's backstabbing, and that's why I really liked it, because some people pitch it as a romantasy, but really I think it's very much more focused on the politics, and the romance is like kind of second.
Nice.
But the limited first person really works for this one, because you're in Jude's perspective, and she is trying to navigate her way through this Fae court, and she makes a lot of things that you would identify later as mistakes if you were seeing from other people's point of view, but you're just following along with her, trying to navigate this unfamiliar and dangerous and suspicious, intriguing world. And it helps build the suspense, because you're with her, with this human girl who's like in over her head, surrounded by all these people with magic that she doesn't have. And I think the limited single point of view works really well for that one, just because of that factor, that it helps build the tension, and it serves the plot well, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm imagining if you're dealing with Faye, then the reveal of the consequence of the deal that's made would be like kind of like a lot better when it is from a first person limited, so that you can like feel the effects of that. Kind of like happens in Dresden from time to time.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think The Cruel Prince has a lot of similarities with Dresden. Like, they have very similar fae, and the main characters are not the same. Like obviously one's a teenage girl and one is a grown adult man, so they're gonna be a little
Questionable.
different.
Arguable. He is
How
grown.
grown is Harry Treston?
He is
He's
tall.
tall. But yeah, Faye in both of those stories are very similar in the machinations and the danger and the backstabbing, like very similar vibes, which is very fun.
Yeah, Fae are one of my favorite just concepts in fantasy in general. I've always liked that and like the genie with the three wishes. I just love like you get what you want, but at what cost? I always love that theme. That's one of my favorites.
Yes, that is a good theme.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads us into an omniscient point of view. So like the exact opposite. This is almost always told from the point of view of a narrator who knows everything and is telling you a story.
Yeah, so this would be like sometimes the narrator is like, if this is a first person omniscient, you're talking like that's the one I've kind of ranted about, where it's like a person telling the story after the fact and, filtering in, they already know everything that's going to happen and they're just telling it to someone. And then you've got like the narrator who's really more separate from the story. They're just unnamed. We don't really know who they are. And they either have like a kind of voice of their own with which they're telling the story, like there's a very like notable presence of the storyteller, or they're just like kind of completely detached.
Right. Kind of from like the detached point of view, Brave New World is that style. Like it's not really like a narrator who's like giving you this lesson or anything or like telling you what's happening. It's just third person omniscient. There's just no like limited nature to it. But an example of third person omniscient that I really enjoy because of the humor infused by the narration style is Good Omens, which is about a demon and an angel raising the Antichrist. It's so funny.
It's a good book. I also enjoy that one.
It's
And yeah,
great.
I agree. Like the omniscient narrator really works for that because it adds to the humor.
Exactly. It's adding so much humor because it's like, oh, well, the angel thinks this is what's happening and the demon thinks this is what's happening. And then they're talking to their bosses and like, meanwhile, the narrator's like kind of poking fun at both of them. It's just a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah. I feel like an omniscient narrator, like I already kind of got into it in my rant, but omniscient narrators work when they have like a personality and an attitude. Like that's when they really work for me.
Exactly. And I have another example that just came to mind, which is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes, I was actually thinking about that too, because that has a similar vibe.
So much humor, so omniscient. Like it is not limited in any way, and it is hilarity. I love it.
Yes, but yeah, my example of an omniscient narrator is The Hobbit. So
classic.
This may be a hot take, I don't know, but I like the story of Lord of the Rings better than The Hobbit, but I like the writing style of The Hobbit better than Lord of the Rings.
I agree with that. I think The Hobbit is just more fun and whimsical, whereas like Lord of the Rings is much more like dry and like here's 20 lines about the rolling hills. Like, okay, hills are rolling. Got it.
Yeah, it's like no shade to the writing of Lord of the Rings, but I just love the writing of The Hobbit. Like it's just the narrator just has just a personality to them, and it's just very charming. It feels like you're just like sitting down with an old storyteller, and the storyteller's like, "All right, come close. I'm going to tell you a real good story."
Exactly.
And it's just it's such like vibes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think you've kind of described, like, isn't that the lore behind the story? That it used to be, like, a story that he told his kids when they were growing up, and then he, like, finally wrote it down, and that's what became The Hobbit. Like, he was telling that to his kids already.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Like, The Hobbit is Bilbo's story, so Like when you're reading it, it doesn't really come across as like, ah, yes, I am Bilbo, I am
Mm-hmm.
telling this story, but that's effectively what it
It is,
is.
yeah.
So,
And Bilbo's great.
but
Frodo's
yeah,
so much
and
more
Bilbo's great.
serious. Bilbo is like genuinely like a very silly character.
He's great. He's like, I don't want to go on an adventure. Oh, actually, this is kind of
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. Say what you will about the movies. I have my own problems with the movies, but I think Martin Freeman as Bilbo is one of the best casting.
Agreed.
He's also in the Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy. He's just good at comedy and playing that kind of, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like aloof a little bit. I don't know. He does a good job.
Yes, definitely. If you haven't read The Hobbit in a while, I recommend picking it back up again because I did that a couple years ago. I was like, wow, this was like way more charming than
Yeah.
I remembered. I just had a delightful time.
Yeah, it's just a fun read. And it's pretty easy, especially compared to Lord of the Rings. It's a lot shorter. The prose is a lot easier to get through. Yeah. And it's just, yeah, it's upbeat, fun, kind of silly. Doesn't take itself nearly as seriously.
But there's still drama.
There is, yeah.
Don't worry.
I mean, it's still Middle Earth. It's still the Ring, so.
So I think that brings us to, I wanted to throw in a last category here, which is we've kind of gone through all the different ways you can divide up points of view. But I'm curious if you had to pick like one point of view that you like, this is just so interesting and like this one really sticks with me. What book example would you give?
The book that I would pick is Cloud Atlas because of the way that the different points of view are so different that even the writing style changes per each section. So the first one is a diary, so it's written like a diary of a dry scientist. So it's kind of like, factual and dry and not as interesting in that way, even though like it's dramatically interesting, but the prose itself isn't. Then you have a point of view that's all letters from this guy who's obsessed with music and everything's an analogy to music and he's full of himself. And then you have like the Pulp Fiction 70s journalist one, and then you have the sci-fi one, and then you have they're just all so interesting and unique, and I could literally talk about that book for like 10,000 years, so I'm gonna keep it at that. But long story short, the points of view are individually unique, not only in like the characterization but also in the prose. And that's the only story I've ever seen do something like that.
Can confirm I'm like 75% of the way
Eek!
through because Michelle got me to read it. So I can confirm like they are all very different points of view, but all very interesting. And I do think it was pretty cool to like combine them all together into one book.
Yeah.
So I'd agree with that choice. That's a good choice.
What's yours?
So mine is kind of going a very different direction with the question, but my favorite book in terms of interesting point of view is The Book Thief. So the thing about The Book Thief that makes the point of view interesting is that it's narrated by Death.
Yeah.
And that might seem really dark, and I mean, it kind of is because it's about Nazi Germany, so that's not great. But it's really Death is characterized so interestingly in this story, like where it's not just grim reaper evil death come to slay people.
Right.
It's like no, he's empathetic and thoughtful and just really tired because he's dealing with all these murders going on, and he's just really worn down by it. But he gets really interested in this one girl, the titular book thief, and starts following her journey. And he is kind of an omniscient point of view here, but it's one that works because his point of view is so interesting. So like, it makes sense that Death would know what's going to happen and that he'd be telling this story and, musing on like, I wish it turned out differently. And it really worked because of the narrator just being so fascinating and just kind of like heartbreaking in a way.
Yeah.
It was like you wouldn't have told me it was like, oh, Death. Like I'm just gonna feel sad for death. By the end of the book, I'm like, oh.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of fiction that our schools made us read growing up. A story told from the point of view of death, yes.
But it's so good.
It is.
I remember I had to read this for, I think it was my junior year English class in high school. And I read it once and I was like, wait, that's so good. So I read it another time just for fun.
Dang, okay.
So I don't know. I like a good historical fiction. So it kind of combined historical fiction with just an interesting, very interesting like storytelling choice to tell it from death.
Yeah.
So it kind of it hit on one of the genres I do enjoy, which helped out.
Yeah.
But
I still think just even the concept of telling a story from the point of view of death is just, as a concept, very interesting. I now feel like I want to read more books from the point of view of death now that the idea's in my head. That sounds like there could be a lot of possibilities for interesting stories.
Honestly, talking about it, I'm like, I want to reread The Book Thief now.
Yeah, okay, maybe we can do a review on that. We can read it together. It's been probably 15 years since I've read it. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while for me too, but it's definitely stuck in my mind because I'd still go back to that as one of my favorite books, honestly.
But yes, that is everything that you need to know about points of view. You've got single, multiple point of view, you've got first, second, and third point of view, and then you have limited and omniscient points of view. Our preferences have been made very clear at this point. What are your preferences, dear listener? I'm very curious. What are some of your favorite books in those categories?
Yes. Do we have any hot takes here?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I feel like point of view just doesn't get talked about enough. So let's make point of view happen instead of just all the memes that say point of view.
Right, exactly. Point of view. You do blah blah blah. Though I do love those memes. I'm a big fan.
It is a good time.
Yes. But yes, leave all your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, do the things, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.